Hey folks, it's Claire from Impactful People, and today I am joined by Kim. So Kim, would you like to give us a quick intro to yourself?
Yes, I would. And I always get really nervous. My mind goes blank when people say, like, give me an intro. I'm like, I'm Kim.
Who am I?
Um, so thanks. So no, I'm Kim. I'm currently living in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, though you wouldn't be able to tell it from my hoodie today. But I am the co-founder of Humaneer app, and we are creating a platform to make HR easier together. So we have created a content and community platform where we focus on micro learning, really practical sort of events and think tanks. We've got a really engaged community where we're just talking about real life stuff. And we're also building one of the world's first sort of HR vertical applications within AI. Basically, we're building something really cool that's going to make HR's job easier if you need to get legislation, find out what's happening, and look at your organizational policies. So that
And
is
I've
something we're really excited to work on.
I've seen it and it's awesome. My main question is it less sassy than it was last time? Last time I saw it.
It is less sassy. It kind of lost its personalities. We've got to give it back. But yeah, it was super sassy at the start. It like had a mind of its own. So it's a lot. It's yeah, it's such a steep learning curve. But I'm sure that's something we'll talk about anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I have to say, for anyone who's interested, absolutely go and check out the community and the work that you guys are doing, because I think you've created an awesome safe space for people that are, excited, but also want to change the world of HR and the people space. And obviously, I care very passionately about this, having been a standalone people person, but also when we're supporting leaders and managers, HR are so crucial to that. So I would love to know a little bit more about your personal journey of kind of how you've got to where you are today. You can start as early as you would like. It could be a therapy session or not, depending on how you want to use
Well,
it.
I was
But yeah, tell us a bit
born
about your
at
journey.
I was born at 6:36 a.m. In Canberra, Australia. No,
Early riser.
I fell into HR. I don't know how many other people sort of fall into that role, but I fell into my HR career when I was in Dubai, actually in the UAE. I applied for a assistant restaurant manager job because I was in my early 20s. I'd only worked in hospitality and I didn't know much else. So I applied to keep doing that. And, really, I feel very grateful that the HR manager at the time saw something in me and instead offered me a role in HR. And I remember literally I didn't study HR like I studied international politics. Like I didn't know anything about HR. I'd never worked in a company before. I remember literally buying that book, like HR for Dummies. I don't know if you remember like those for dummy books, but I bought a HR for Dummies book when I was
Amazing.
in my early 20s and fell in love with it. It was a really different learning curve. I think starting your HR career in Dubai, which has
Yeah.
very different, or at least 20 years ago, had very different ways of working and legislation and things that we're probably not used to in like Australia or the UK. So definitely was, a really interesting way to learn. And I was there for about 3.5, 4 years. So a really good time. And I mean, we were working with people from 50 different countries around the globe. So
Yeah.
being able to build things and communicate and just cultural awareness. It was amazing. Like I don't think I would have progressed as quickly as I did if I hadn't had that sort of
Mm.
experience. And when I moved back to Australia, I was almost like, oh my gosh, if I can HR in Dubai, I could HR anywhere. Like Australia, you've got one legislation, easy. Like that's fine. We can deal with that. And then I sort of continued in my HR career. I worked in not-for-profits. I've
Nice.
worked in higher education, hospitality. So a lot in sort of startups. I've never been in sort of a large corporation because I am really passionate about being able to have an impact and, being able to work with
Yeah.
people really closely, seeing sort of the end results. and probably spent my last sort of 5 years as a head of people and culture at a growing scale up. We sort of quadrupled headcount over sort of 3 years during COVID. Like it was wild. And then decided to take a little bit of break because, to be honest, was pretty burnt out. Two young
Yeah.
kids, COVID, scaling company, bloody tired. I was going to say a different word, but very tired. And
You can say what you like on
took
this
some
podcast.
time out, and it was yeah, great. I was like, is this a sensitive podcast? So yeah, it was during that time that Corrine and I had been, my co-founder at Humaneer app, we'd been sort of work friends, and we would just talk a lot, and she was sort of in the same situation, and we were like, man, there is no support for us. Like, we are here to support everyone else, but when we were going through the challenges that we were going through, we didn't really have anyone to turn to. We would talk to ourselves or no one, because it's not
Yeah.
something, this isn't a job that you can really go home to and talk to your partner or family or friends. So we're like, there is something missing in the HR for HR space. And that's when the idea for Humaneer app was born, and we went through a lot of iterations, but we've really landed on, we think we can make a difference and make HR easier and
Yeah.
easier in a lot of different ways. Like, just save you time, because HR people don't have time, connect you with people, because HRs can be like a really lonely job, especially if you're a standalone, which Corrine and I both have been for a long time. We can give you information, because it's actually, HR information's really spread out and difficult to get. So
Yeah.
if we can bring it all together for you, we can make it easier. And so that's sort of where the idea has spun out. And now we've got, a really strong community, and sort of through that journey have thought, we can build something to make it even easier for you with our AI application, who we've called Mac, Sassy
I
Mac. And that's
yes,
where we are. So have become a lifer, and now a startup founder, very different, but and loving the challenge. And fun fact, have actually realized during my HR career, there's been a lot of sort of business and commercial skills that, we've both picked up along the way, that has been really relevant into how we're building this company.
I think it's so true. I mean, there's so much to dig into there. First of all, I have to say, I think what you guys have created is amazing. And not just because it's lovely and fabulous and making people's lives better, but I think the response you've had from the community just shows how needed it was. And globally,
Yeah.
you've got people from all over the world that are responding to this and saying,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Tell me more.
I mean, it's fantastic. It's fantastic, but then you also think, oh shit, there's such a huge need. Like, HR needs
Yeah.
all this support. So on one hand, really good. One hand, you're a bit like,
Yeah,
that's
can I
okay.
do enough? Can I do enough? But whatever you do to
Exactly.
be impactful, I guess, there is already things. I think even just bringing the community together so people know they're not in it alone is so powerful, and giving them that space to have
Mm.
people to speak to. But I think you posted recently as well about how, HR has been one of the most disrupted industries in the past years. And,
Mm.
I think that's massively playing into the amount of stress and the volume of things that HR are expected to know. How have you experienced that yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we kind of talk about HR as being kind of like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, really, just in terms of the shift forward in so many ways, in terms of different ways of working. Like, what we're 2024, 5 years
Mm,
ago, we weren't working remotely. Like,
yeah.
it wasn't really a thing. So to jump and change so drastically in such a short period of time is huge. And there's so much for us to catch up on. There's things around talent, organizational ways of working, DE and I, like, that is become really, really, it's always been important, but now it's like really important, psychosocial safety. Like, there's just different expectations on the workplace now than there was even sort of 5-10 years ago. And I
Mm,
definitely think that that's a bit of a post-COVID hangover. And HR,
absolutely.
the organizations and people are looking at HR saying, okay, cool, how do we manage a remote workforce? And we're like, well, we've spent our whole lives being in office. Like,
Yeah.
just give us a sec. There's no playbook for how we sort of do things. How do we manage AI? Like, how do we do that again, we don't know. We're trying to navigate it and learn together. So, yeah, there is just so much happening in our space. And I think the organizational expectation on HR is just increased exponentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. Something I've been thinking about a lot more recently is how we think about the specialisms within HR. I think should really be changing and shifting. And I actually was speaking to a cultural anthropologist yesterday, which is another episode of the podcast that will be coming out soon, which was
Was that
so
that
interesting.
Sam?
Yes, Sam. I thought you might know Sam. Yeah, she's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, but it was just so interesting that the dynamics that we need to be considering when we're bringing these diverse workforces together. But that's just one segment of all of the things that people need to be focused on. And I don't know about you, a lot of people come into traditional HR from more of an employment law background. There's been a shift in the more kind of cultural and people side of thinking, but they're almost like not opposite, but different disciplines, right? And you're expected to understand this huge breadth as well as of all the new changes, technology. You
Yeah.
need to be commercial if you want to be a successful senior leader. You need to be commercial. You need to understand the products. You need to understand how the business operates. And it's like, is there
Mhm.
any part of the organization that you don't need to know about to be really successful in that role? I don't think there is. And we don't expect that of other
Yeah.
senior leaders in the business.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, and there's a couple of things. I do feel like in HR, like we are the ones that are expected to know everything.
Mm,
Like it's not common that HR is not meant to know, and that's a huge amount of pressure, I think, on HR and individuals, like not feeling safe to say in an organization, I don't know yet.
yeah.
We've never done this before. Let's work it out. I don't think a lot of HR feel comfortable to say that externally. Internally, we'll
Mm,
say to ourselves, oh my God, what the hell is happening? Like, how
yeah.
do we do this? But what I am loving seeing at this time at the moment is the rise of kind of like fractional support in the
100%.
HR space and being able to tap into different skill sets as you need. I don't think when I was in an internal role, I utilized that enough or even knew it existed enough
Mm,
and felt like I would always have to be the expert on remuneration and benefits, which I'm not, or, workplace health and safety, which I'm not. But now being able to, tap into those people that are experts and get them to support on a project or something, I think that's a really fantastic way to manage some of that going forward.
I absolutely agree. And I think even more so, like you were saying, when you're in standalone roles or you've got a small people team and you just, you don't have the capacity, you don't have the knowledge spread out, then using other people that are specialists in those areas absolutely beneficial. And,
Yeah.
often you don't have the money
Yeah.
to invest in someone in a role like that permanently. So I guess one of
Yeah.
the other,
100%. Like it would always, oh, sorry,
you
I
go,
interrupted you.
you go,
I would always think like you have to either have a full-time person or a part-time person or like a role for this. But now you're like, no, I can just literally pick someone's brain for a month
yeah,
or less
absolutely.
than.
Yeah, it's super powerful, super powerful. There's so many people offering amazing services at the moment, but we won't dig into that too much right now. But sorry, I've gone all husky all of a sudden. I guess the other side of this, which I care quite a bit with some of the work that I'm doing, is what the impact is on leaders and people managers with the pressure that's on HR. So what are you personally have you felt that you're not able to do or support, or what feedback have you got from leaders that they're
Mm.
struggling with because of the pressure that's on you as a
Do you know what? Leadership is hard and management is hard. And I just want to acknowledge that straight up because we can sometimes shit all over like leaders and managers for not doing a good job and things like that. But we often know that people are put in roles without the support, without the understanding of what this means. Like, just do it. So it's a hard job. So I just want to acknowledge that in the first instance. And as much as HR is kind of feeling, I guess, the pressure and the change of everything, so are leaders and managers because they're almost like the front line of these employees questions. So they're going through just as much change as we are. I think sometimes the hardest tension between HR and managers is, what is HR meant to do? What are managers meant to do? Whose responsibility is this? Like that is a huge tension, and I don't think it's always like super clear. But from a leadership perspective, I don't know if they've been upskilled with the right skills to sort of take us through that, because I mean, HR necessarily haven't been either. It's almost like we're all in this together. But I do know, we did a little poll with our Humaneer community and, sort of talked about what are some of your biggest challenges in your role. And a lot, the number one thing, I hate to say it, was like leadership capability.
Yep.
So we know that that's a huge gap. It's a huge gap. Like we just haven't nailed leadership and management.
And
which sucks.
I mean, I obviously have lots of thoughts about this, and I agree. I think there's many reasons.
Yes. And I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think one of the big areas is, I guess there's two things for me. One, we just don't invest enough time into it. Exactly like you said, we think it's just a thing people can do. It's like, oh, you've seen it. Leaders exist, so you must be able to be a leader. Congratulations, good luck.
Yeah.
But actually, the impact of not having the right leadership in place is just insane. There's another part for me that's, they're just so critical to everything that's happening within an organization. One of the other things is around, it can mean different things. It does mean different things in different businesses, and we do not invest the time and energy in defining what it means for our business. And that can be, what does leadership mean? What does being a people manager mean? What are our expectations of the time you're spending managing versus still being an individual contributor? We know in startups quite often your managers aren't full-time managers or leaders. They're still doing individual contributor work as well. We just need to be really upfront about defining that. And then it even goes for me into things like defining what high performance is as an organization. It's just, I guess what I always feel is missing in all of these areas is the foundational basics. Just be really clear with your expectations. Yes. Anyone who's listened to me talk will hear me bang on all the time about kindness, being a kind leader. That for me is not pleasing everybody or giving everyone everything they ask for. It's setting your expectations, letting people opt in or out. We just miss a lot of that foundational stuff, which would make life easier for people, I think.
We miss a lot of that human connection, which is exactly what you talk about. In that, I mean, it's almost like we get put into a manager role, and then we think that we've got to be really tough, like a tough boss, and they've got to do what I say. And I think that's absolutely a product of, an old, very traditional sort of way of managing. I am loving seeing, this sort of new wave of leadership coming in, and, our people are going to expect different things. Like the what do they call them? Gen Z?
Gen Z,
they're not going to put up with, micromanagers, people that are rude, people that are disrespectful. It's super tough, and you're 100% spot on. Like a lot of the times people get promoted into manager roles, and this is like just stuff we have been talking about forever. Like when I started in HR, 100% this is the stuff we used to talk about. People getting promoted into roles with no clear expectations of what it means. But also, here's the trick, I think, because I've been thinking about this. We don't value the people side of management, mostly. You could be a really shit manager, crap to your people, but if you're hitting your targets and, you are meeting your revenues and your goals and your KPIs, you're going to be seen as a success, like 95% of the time. Like we don't value being sort of a good, empathetic, human, kind leader. And I don't think until organizations change what they value, why would managers sort of do that? That's just a thread that I thought was really interesting.
I agree. I think this is...
So pull on that one, Claire.
Yeah, I'm already in my brain. It's pulling. Gosh, yeah. So much to think and say on that.
Enjoy that.
again, though, I think the problem there is if that is what you care about, if you're a business that just purely cares about hitting your targets, and that is, you don't care how much it costs to lose people, bring more people in because you're hitting your targets, be upfront about that. Like, I am not here to judge
Yeah.
anyone in what they as a business think is right or wrong. I mean, I will judge people on how they treat people, but if they're not explicit about that's the problem. They attract a certain type of people, then
Yeah.
it's not what they
Yeah.
expected, etc., etc. We know what happens, but just be explicit about who you are. Let people opt in and opt out. That's the bit that we're missing, is that big transparency piece about being authentic.
Yeah. Because people, or it's not cool for organizations to say that we don't care about people. Like, they're
Yeah.
not going to attract people in there.
Nope.
Like, that's
But
why they don't say it.
it's
Because,
true. But they would attract the people that just care about making the money,
yeah.
which are probably the
Yeah.
right people for that
No,
business.
no matter what the cost. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the hard thing is, and what you see now is organizations that say, we're all about people, we care about our people. And then all the actions say the opposite. Like, and that's a huge misalignment and sunken
Mm.
time cost and cultural impact and all of that. So yeah,
It's like,
completely just be upfront, even if it's not cool.
exactly, just be honest. You're going to spend less time, energy, money messing around otherwise, and you'll have less people slagging you off on
Yeah.
Glassdoor and asking your HR to go and look to your Glassdoor.
Yeah. Or even LinkedIn, you won't be
Yeah,
cancelled.
exactly.
It's such a brand
Exactly.
thing, though, as well. Like, I don't know if it's just a little ecosystem that I'm involved in, but it can really impact like your bottom line if like all the stuff that we've seen come out recently about the big organizations that are treating people really badly. It
Hmm.
makes me think twice before I look at buying from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Totally
Removes that
agree.
goodwill.
So,
It's
I mean, we
important.
we
It's
sorry, go on.
important.
Yeah, it is absolutely.
No, I was just reiterating it's important. I was just like, it's important.
Yeah, it's so important. I think one of the other things I heard you talking about recently as well is like courage in leadership, and I think maybe you were talking about it from perspective of courage in HR, and I think it's true across the board, and some of what we've just been touching on there about being
Yeah.
authentic and being honest. Kind of talk to me a little bit more about what you were
Yeah.
thinking.
Do you know what? I tend to write things just on the fly, like as I think about them and as I feel about them. And I think I was seeing someone talking about courage, and I was like, it does take a lot of courage to be in a position, whether it is in HR or as a leader or manager, and sort of say your opinion and push back against the norm. And it's not kind of words that I'm really familiar with when it comes to those roles. You hear a lot of other words, but I'm like, actually, it takes a lot of courage to be authentic, and it
Mm,
takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, and it takes a lot of courage to sort of be the one in the room to say, I actually disagree with that. And I think it's actually something, if we can strengthen that in HR and as leaders and managers, it could be a really powerful skill to develop.
mm,
It was something that it actually came to me like 6 a.m. one morning, and I was like, it's actually really important. And in my career, I can pinpoint, the times where I felt more courageous to have those conversations and those times where I didn't, because
mm.
absolutely there's times where I didn't. And it's hard. It's
Yeah,
really hard. And particularly as a leader, and having even difficult conversations with your staff, it takes a lot of courage to kind of step into that space. And I think we don't do it enough because we're fearful of the responses. We're fearful of, how people are going to view us, or, what the impact's going to be. And I don't think it does anyone any favors. That's kind of where
yeah.
my brain went when I was
I,
thinking
I
about that.
totally agree. I think that most of what you do as a leader, if you care about being a good leader and manager, I totally agree, takes a lot of courage. And a lot of self-reflection. I think if you're invested in being a good leader, you
Yeah.
spend time reflecting on who you are, what you value, what you're doing
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
that can be a hard journey in itself.
Yeah.
It's almost like a version of therapy. I actually know a lot of people, some of the
Yeah.
people I've mentored
Huge.
have blended mentorship with therapy, and they're not just unpacking like stuff at work, but they're
Yeah.
unpacking like things about themselves that have made them who they are, that is impacting who they are as a leader. And I'm sure you've said there's times you're more courageous than others, and I'm
Huge.
sure that's a mix of environment, but also how you're feeling about yourself in
Yeah.
that moment. And I think it's really difficult. It is,
Correct.
and this is where I think it's really important to have support for people, because there's going to be times, no matter how confident or experienced they are, that they need additional support and guidance, and just even sometimes just an ear to listen to the things that they're struggling with in that moment.
It's almost like a vulnerability to say, just because I'm a leader, whether I am, very early in like a team leader, or if I'm, the CEO of an organization, doesn't mean I know everything, and doesn't
Yeah,
mean that I don't have blind spots and I'm not a human. And so often we project onto our leaders that we think they're infallible and they shouldn't be able to make mistakes. And I know, again, that, I mean, growing up, I was always like, oh my God, this, the CEO is always right.
yeah,
And it was only as I grew in my career and I became closer to that space and that role that I was like, oh, they're just a human, they're just, you know, kind of making stuff up as well as we go
yeah,
along. Like
doing it.
there's
Yeah,
no
we're
kind of
always
playbook for how we run these organizations. Everything's different. And then you're like,
absolutely.
oh, okay, this looks different.
I think that my top tip for humbling is just being around some children. They are always very good at making
Uh,
you feel humble, and making you realize that you are definitely not important.
no, they're great at bringing you down, making sure you know your place.
Yes. I mean, one of the other things as well, you've talked about Corinne, and I think we'll use the fact she's not here to, talk about her, because obviously that's only fair.
Perfect.
But I think we've talked about this a lot, like people need support. And I think I've personally found the roles that I've been most effective in is where I've got a really strong partnership with another member of the leadership team, or the CEO, or whoever it is that I'm working closely with.
100%.
What is it that's made you and Kareem work, do you think, as founders of Humaneer?
I think a couple of things, and we've not even talked about this. So let's see when you get her on the podcast, if she says the same thing, it'll be one of those like blind date things. I think we were work friends first and foremost.
Yeah.
We have now grown to be extremely close personal friends, but initially we were work friends who had the same problem and wanted to solve it. So we started off with, still quite a professional kind of relationship, and I think we thought on the surface level we were really similar. We've had a fairly similar journeys. We've both been in HR for the same amount of time. We both come from sort of, she's Scottish, I'm Australian, fairly similar sort of Anglo type backgrounds.
Yeah.
Both worked in like the startup world, both kind of connected, which is why we were work friends with the same philosophy. But as we've, continued to work deeper, we've realized that we've got different strengths, which is fantastic. But the key thing to that is we've been able to create a space where we can say, I'm not really good at that. Can you do that? Or that, not that I'm not good at it, but that doesn't give me energy and I
Yeah.
don't enjoy spending time doing that. Can we swap? And so being able to be vulnerable with each other, it's still something like, I mean, the first 6 months we were still really like HRE, closed book, like not giving too much away, like we've totally got this. And just through the journey, we've been able to say, I totally don't got this. Like,
Mm,
and I think it's really helped that we've been on the same learning journey together. We're
yeah.
both first time founders, both doing this for the first time. We've created a space to be vulnerable with each other, and we've been really flexible with that. Some days or some weeks Kareen is absolutely on fire, and those are the weeks that I'm sick or I've got my kids or something like that, and then we, vice versa. But I think being able to comfortably play in our strengths, and we've totally swapped around things as well. Like I was like taking the lead on some things, and then we've totally swapped, gone, I didn't enjoy that at all. So
Yeah.
I think if we're able to continue to be really flexible and have that open communication and know that ultimately we're working together to solve this problem, hopefully that will continue to set us up on this relationship. We've also learned a lot being in HR and have seen what's worked and what's not. And, we've tried to take some of those learnings into our relationship as well.
Great. I mean, I would love to know some of the. Maybe we need to do a follow up because at some point we should dig into all the things that worked and which didn't. So we'll pause that one for now
Oh,
because that might be a
yeah.
long.
More than happy, because you don't know. Oh, it's huge, huge. Yeah, that's a podcast in itself.
Brilliant. Well, I'm excited about that because I'm sure there'll be some comical things that we can share as well as horrifying and celebrating. Obviously, there are always
Yeah.
examples of people doing this thing's great. So I would love to know. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of we're heading toward. Well, I say we're in the summer in the UK. It's supposed to be the summer. I know it's your winter, but it feels more like winter here at the moment, even though it's July.
Yeah.
Miserable. Although the sun has just creeped out, so fingers crossed it stays that way this afternoon.
Oh.
But as we head towards like September time, people are always starting to think about planning for their next year. Do you have any tips for things? There's been a lot of change, not in the world itself. In the UK, we've just had elections, and we now have a new prime minister from a new party. So big shifts and things in HR. I've seen a lot of "don't panic, everyone." Don't know what it means yet. Hopefully, personally, I think it'll be a lot of positive things. Do you have any top tips for things that leaders should be thinking about as they head into their planning for next year?
Yeah, look, besides, there's a lot of those practical things, as you mentioned, what's our strategy, what's changed in legislation, there's a whole bunch of practical to do things that you really should do. What's our plan for the year? How are we going to communicate? But I was thinking about that, and I think one of the most interesting things is you spoke about it, self-reflection.
Yeah.
I think it's always really important and a good opportunity to say, am I, does this job still give me energy? Am I still enjoying being a leader? Is this something I want to do, or did I just get promoted because I was the best at sales and now I'm the head of sales, but I actually hate it and I just want to get back to doing sales? I think we don't often get the chance to pause and reflect back and say, am I where I want to be in my career? We kind of just tend to like go with it and flow with it. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of just think, am I happy? Does this bring me joy? Do I have energy? And if the answer is yes, fantastic, then you've got the opportunity to say, am I being the leader that I want to be? Or am I stuck in the weeds because I've got all this pressure and I haven't worked out my team? But understanding, do I want to do this? Am I showing up as the leader I want to be? And if I'm not, where can I go to get that support? Because it's out there. It's such a great opportunity, I think, to reset for the year ahead on who you are personally and where you want to go. So besides all those practical things, I think there's a lot of, internal reflections that could happen at this time of year as well, before you go into the day-to-day operations, because before you'll blink and it will be September next year.
Absolutely. I think it's such a good point and really great advice, actually. Just take that time. So I have two last questions for you. One is, have you read anything recently? Any books or podcasts? Not podcasts, sorry, that's not reading, listening. Articles that you'd recommend to people at the moment?
I really love books and things. Actually, there's a great book. It's such a fantastic book that I do really love. It's called Undisrupted. No, God, what's it called? Oh my God.
You can always send it me afterwards.
I've lost it. Can I send it? And then I'll tell you.
Tell us
I'll
what it's
quickly
about.
Google it. It's by a guy that runs his own audio visual business here in Australia. And he is just a really down to earth. He's just got a really down to earth management style. And it's just, when you read through, the book is really easy to read, but you just go, yeah, that makes sense. Like, a lot of it is kind of like basic human decency and treating people right and doing the right things. And it just shows that by doing that, you can still be really successful. I've got to find it for you, because he's also got like a podcast where he does 10-minute
Great.
like weekly things, and I love micro learning, so I'm like, that's fantastic. So I'll send it to you and you can sort of share it with
Do yeah, we'll
your
link it in the
listeners.
description. Awesome. So my last question is, if you could hear us talk about anything else on this podcast, what topics would you love us to hear, or
From around a leadership and management perspective, you know what? I would love to hear from some leaders and managers about what are their challenges? What's stopping them from showing up and sort of being the leader that they want to be? And what support could they use? Like, what do they need to be able to do that? That would be really helpful, I think, for people to understand that lived experience and, yeah, how people really feel about it.
Well, great answer, because I might have some of that lined up. So thank you.
And we didn't even plan that, so
I know, it's amazing. It
that
was
was
meant to
cool.
be. Well, Kim, honestly, thank you. It's been such a pleasure chatting. I feel like this could have gone on all day. Well, it's your evening, so I'll let you have some downtime.
Finish my glass of wine.
Exactly. Friday vibes. Friday vibes.